Welcome to WCS Talks Unplugged, where we bring you real stories, real solutions for the mind and the planet. This podcast is brought to you by Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, a global community elevating women's leadership, accelerating climate solutions, and championing a more equitable, clean economy. Every episode, we sit down with the thinkers, builders, and innovators, redefining what climate leadership looks like and doing it with purpose and heart. So settle in, take a breath, and get ready for an honest, insightful conversation that just might spark your next idea, shift your perspective, or inspire your own climate journey. Let's get unplugged.
Hello and welcome to WCS Talks Unplugged. Today we're exploring something very powerful, how access to solar energy and light can transform the well-being and opportunities for women and communities. I'm Trish Pinnella. I'm a board member with Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability and the marketing chair for the past 2 years. And I'm thrilled to welcome you, Nicole Watson, the founder of Iconic Earth Foundation. Nicole has spent more than a decade leading solar initiatives that bring clean light to students and families living in off-grid communities through her program Watts On, lighting students' lives. And you have 20 years experience in the film industry, and you've traveled immensely through many countries and especially Africa. And you blend storytelling and renewable energy and community leadership to programs. So Nicole, welcome to the podcast. And I'm so glad you're here. We'll just start with at the beginning. What inspired you to start Iconic Earth?
Great. Well, thanks, Trish. I'm really excited to be here today and be a part of the show. I love what WCS is doing for the community and women in renewable energy. Just back from Africa, where I was in 4 different countries. So I'm fresh with lots of different topics and discoveries and findings about our program. I'm looking forward to discussing those.
Yeah, a lot's happened in the last 2 years since we met.
Yeah, definitely. Since our hike in LA and on Climate Week,
Yeah.
when the climate that day was very overheated. So, Iconic Earth, we're focused on renewable energy solutions for students and communities that live off grid. We started with programs in India back in 2015, 2016, and doing solar installation at a trafficking rescue, water filtration. At that point, we had a sponsor. We did that. And then also I produce films. So coming from a film background, I overlay that into the projects that I work on and try and tell compelling stories of impacts you'd never think of that happen as a result of the solar coming into play in these facilities or schools or in the hands of students in the case of our solar lighting program.
You have also started schools.
Yeah, so we built a school and library, which is now an education center. We were initially going to build a small microgrid charging station for phones in that community because the community members pay about 20 cents to charge. People don't have electricity, so they have to go places and charge, and they pay about 20 cents to charge. So with my Kenya team, our idea was to build a small charging station that they could charge their phones. The money would go towards repairing the solar, and it would be a small sustainable model. However, when we got to site and we sat with all the elders, they came to us and they said, we think that's a really great idea, but we're not really interested in that. We'd actually prefer a school. And they're like, our little ones have to walk all the way, through this terrain to get to this other school. There's hyena, baboon, risk from other community members in other regions, and we would really like a school here. And then one of the elders put up his hand and he said, and I'm willing to donate the land for the school. I will donate this parcel of land if we can do that. So there we were with this big plan to do one thing and, community wanting another. And it's really important to listen to the community and respect, their needs. And with that, it was something that they also wanted to engage with. So we went ahead and I reworked the budget to build a small school facility, and that is still running. We've had a few challenges with it, but right now we've managed to get it recognized under the county education department, and there's 2 teachers there, and there's, I believe, around 110 students right now going to that school. So they've split them into 2 classrooms. And one of my new partners, we're looking at building a new facility, like another building on the site. So yes, I have built a school, but our solar lighting program, I felt, had a lot more traction. So we were reaching a lot more students, greater regions. We were able to work with schools that were already built and on the ground and start bringing in additional programs. And for me, on our own very small budget with my NGO, and what we could do with that program versus the cost to build schools and the number of students you impact, I decided to reroute and focus on the solar lighting program. So we branded that Watts On, lighting students' lives, electricity watts turning on. Yes, my name is Watson.
I love that.
It's just a play on words.
Yeah, because it really improved.
A whole, yeah,
I mean, they did better in school. They had more safety. Yeah. So talk about maybe the power dynamics that shifted.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to think that these are individuals and communities that live very close to the earth. So very earthen houses, off grid. They like their off grid and pastoralist life as far as that's what they know. And they have their own beliefs around that. And I respect that. It's living out of the realms of a tied in society in some ways. Other communities are using solar panels or tied in. But when it comes to people thinking, okay, we can set up a microgrid and put power lines in and grid tie these people, it doesn't work. They're semi-nomadic, they're pastoralists, they move where the goats and the cows move to get food, and they don't have regular income every month to pay these bills. When it comes to a small handheld solar lamp, this is perfect for that lifestyle and very useful for the entire family. So we did a pilot project, and through the pilot, we realized that the impact on educational performance was quite strong. And I cut a documentary film about the project. And during that process, we were interviewing mothers and students and young girls and things that were part of the solar lighting program. And a few of them started telling us, unrelated, that when they have a light outside of their hut at night, they have greater safety and security because people from other villages will not come in and assault them when they're sleeping or, inside their house without light at night. And I was quite shocked when I heard this because they literally said, like, it's quite harsh to hear, but they literally said, we are not worried about being raped if there's a light out front of our hut. And to top it off, they also come and steal livestock, steal chickens, other things. But when there's a light, they won't. Which I was curious, why wouldn't they? How would a small solar light deter somebody? And they simply said the people don't want to be recognized and they don't want their face recognized in the community for fear of shame or, retaliation. So if there's a light out front, we sleep comfortably, and it's lowering pregnancy and lowering STDs. One of the girls started listing off all the things. And when I heard that was kind of like an aha, like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of other impacts that we're seeing: reduced snake and scorpion bites, able to scare away hyena and other things. But this particular impact was enough for me to be like, wow, this is really like a safety and security tool as well as education benefit. And higher education means also reduced risk in other ways of poverty and early marriage and things like that, which these communities face. And so I pivoted and focused most of our effort on this program. At the same time, the film we titled Light was being edited and completed, and that started circulating global events, film festivals. It went to COP16 in Saudi Arabia, the big environmental event. We screened at United Nations Association Film Fest in Palo Alto, and the woman that runs that, Jasmine, she took it to the United Nations and screened it at an info poverty conference in New York. And then it went to umpteen festivals in Italy and Germany and Spain, and screened around Africa as well, which was nice. So our team locally could participate. And then that kind of drew more attention into the program and the impact and allowed us to get the support to then build on that. And we initially launched in Kenya. So the focus of all my work going into Africa after India was in Kenya. So from 2019, I started working there. And the solar lighting program, we started scaling there in 4 different regions. And then we took it to Zambia last year. So that was our first hop into a new country. So we're then working in 2 countries. And this year, we've just launched in Uganda, and we will be going into West Africa later this year, into Sierra Leone and Senegal. So the program is really taking off. It's very exciting. The impacts are, I mean, it's fairly similar impacts, but different small stories happening in the different countries, depending on environment and habits and things like that.
So amazing. So, with going into Uganda, were there any new challenges?
I couldn't do this without the support of Child Fund, who came on, and he came on 2 years ago. And although they're not financing the program, they do support a lot of the field operation expenses. So we were spending a fortune on getting the lamps to the students into these remote communities, as far as fuel, vehicle hire, going back and monitoring to survey the impact. And Child Fund has now come on since last year and really supported that effort, because they have teams on the ground and in the rural communities as well as in the city centers. So my role has also shifted somewhat, where I come in and I train the Child Fund team. I work with their regional partners to launch, and then we look at scaling the next year once everybody is trained and kind of aligned on how we deliver the program and also how we monitor the impacts of the program. So there's a lot of solar lighting distribution groups out there. They go out, they say, yes, we've distributed 100,000 lights, 50,000 lights, but there's not a lot of follow-up. So they're not staying with the students or the families to understand the longer term impact, and also to kind of make sure that that lamp stays with the student. So a lot of times, if they're not being monitored or there's not a lot of oversight, then, why wouldn't the parents just take the lamp? Whereas with our program, we do a lot of training and sensitization with the students and the parents to make sure that the student will stay with the lamp. Let the parents know that we're monitoring the student, we're monitoring the impact, we're doing a lot of reporting with the school, and we will be following up in 1 year up to 2 years' time, which kind of lays it in a little bit more. And we do a level of data collection so we can take baseline metrics, understand what type of lighting they're using at home right now, get the contact information of the parents, and each lamp has a serial number. So then that gets associated with the student for warranty and things like that. So we have a whole process as far as delivering the solar product.
And measuring the impact, that's important, right? Because then you see what's actually happening.
Yeah. So on school performance, and then qualitative as far as surveying and research from the view of the teacher, of the parents, and also the students, which is, for me, it's a really exciting stage of the work, because that's when all the interesting stories come up of impact and how it's changing routine at home, mental well-being, stronger levels of confidence. Some of the elders in that initial stage when I was doing the film, they said, we're communicating differently now. We used to come home and we couldn't see any of our family members' faces. We would just kind of communicate and go to sleep or whatever. But now we come home, we can actually see their faces and see their expressions. And it's changed everything in our household.
Yeah. I mean, our lights go out for a couple hours and we freak out and we light lots of candles. So when I think about that, because I really just focused on the ability to learn and didn't really even consider all these other benefits and, the confidence and safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to know like a specific girl or family that has really stuck with you and their story.
Yeah, so a couple students have kind of stuck with me over time, and two of them were featured in our film. We filmed them when they were in grade 8. So that's when we started, because they had received the solar lamps and they were kind of the top performing boy and girl of one of the schools in kind of our focus community. And the young girl, her dream in the film when we shot was to be a teacher, and the boy wanted to be a doctor. His father had passed away due to like some kind of lung or breathing issues, which a lot of people get because of the kerosene and the paraffin lamps, breathing all those fumes inside a small space. And she got into secondary. She was not, the top performing student in secondary, but she was very determined. She's the oldest of, I think, 4 or 5 kids. And she continued through secondary. We went and visited her when she was in a secondary school. And then now she's in university. So I visited her again on the last trip. She's still determined to become a teacher. Her family has now all gotten behind her. So her grandma is helping support her school fees and her little accommodation rental fees. And it's really nice to see because often, girl children are held back because they have to help the mom or they're, married off early or they get pregnant at a young age. But she's really been determined and she's positioned herself as kind of the leader of her brothers and sisters that now they all want to follow her in her footsteps. And I asked her, I'm like, if you could ask for one thing or one like something you want to ask me, what would it be? And she just said, when I graduate to become a teacher, if there's any way you could help me to get a job because, the job market is so difficult here because such a huge part of the population is under 30. Like it's an exorbitant amount of the population, which is under 30 years old, under 35 years old. So the job markets are tough. So that was nice. And she's really sweet. So it's nice to see. And then the young boy, he wanted to be a doctor. He told us that he used his lamp for about 2-3 years after he received it. The lamps have a 5-year life cycle. And he got into a secondary school that had light and electricity. So he gave his lamp back to his mom, who was, she's a widow because her husband passed away. So she kept using the light. He was in secondary and okay. And then he went into college, but he's pivoted to go into public relations because he said his chemistry scores were not high enough to become a doctor. So, he's still, pursuing that and we're keeping in touch. And then, I don't know, speaking to the students and just hearing their little stories of change. And one boy was telling us how he wasn't a very good performer. He said he wasn't very good academically prior to receiving the light. He was just kind of making it. Then once he got a lamp, he actually became quite high up in his class as far as performance because often these kids have a lot of chores when they get home. They have to go collect water, which is often miles away. They have to collect sticks and wood for the fire. And by the time take cattle or goats to feed, by the time you do all this, the sun is going down and that's the end of your day. That's it.
Yeah.
So you either have the fire or the moon. Anyways, he said he was getting a lot of headaches from using kerosene, so he wasn't feeling well. And then now with the lamp, he's gone to quite high up in his class. He said he gets up early. He can use the lamp to shake the scorpions and spiders out of his uniform. Again, you never think like this is a daily thing. You don't want to put your uniform on when it's still dark,
Right.
because it could have creepy crawlies in it and you risk getting bit and then you're injured from that. So it's like all these challenges that a simple tool can mitigate and just make your life a little bit easier in ways, which then alleviates stress and builds confidence and empowerment. Yeah, and like there's no bathrooms or running water in the household, so you do have to go out to kind of an outhouse or a latrine facility, and going out at night. There's baboon, hyena, lion in some cases. You do have animals on site. Most families have goats or cattle on site, which attract wild animals. And to walk that distance to go to the bathroom at night and come back to your room can be terrifying, it's like a challenge. So it's just little things you don't think of. And, it wasn't so long ago that our ancestors were using kerosene and whale oil and things like this. It was only a couple generations back.
It's amazing.
If you are listening to WCS Talks Unplugged, you are already a part of the conversation. Now it's time to be a part of the community. Join Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability and connect with a global network of women and allies building climate solutions together. Become a member at womeninCleanTechSustainability.org.
So how can everyone listening support you or get involved with Econic Earth?
To get involved with Econic Earth, the best way to do that, of course, follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. We share a lot of updates. On Instagram, we have both Econic Earth and also What's on Kids. So What's on Kids, they're linked. Most of the time we post simultaneously, but because the program is so vivid and we've brought on partners and supporters, I kind of branded that as its own entity. So same with the websites. So there's www.econearth.org, and there's also whatson.org, which are linked internally, but you will still find two websites. So to follow us online is the best way. Of course, all donations we use for the biggest investment for our programs is purchasing the solar lamps. We look for corporate sponsors and grants as well. The Rotary clubs have started to take interest in supporting us. And what they like and what a lot of sponsors like about our program is the majority of the funds go to the purchase of the solar lamps, because a lot of our field expenses, we have a donor, we have a supporter, child fund. So they come in with a lot of the field operation. They cover salaries and the costs for their own team. So the bulk of our support and donations goes to the purchase of the solar lamp. And then we keep our operational costs on the US side fairly streamlined. And I do have a sponsor for operations at this point. So again, any support donors bring on is going towards our solar lamps at this point. The more funds we get in, the more lamps we can purchase, which means the more students we can serve. And we're estimating right now for every one lamp impacts about 5 people in a household. We're starting to include that in our initial data collection right now to understand households numbers. But for now, it's approximately 5. Between the children and the parents under the roof is about 5. So
That's amazing.
so that's exciting. Even the teachers were telling us one of the stories just a few weeks ago that one of the schools we do these closing ceremonies where we give certificates to most improved students, best in performing students. I bring little gifts so we can put a gift pack together. The kids get excited about even pencils and erasers. Like they get excited about having these new things, which is very endearing and sweet. But during that time, I take the opportunity to talk to the kids and talk to the teachers as well. And one of the teachers was telling us, he said, Nicole, before our school wasn't going anywhere. Out of 23 schools in the region, we were always last or second to last, or that was it. He said no kids were going to national schools, which secondary, you have the national schools, which are the better schools with better teachers and higher quality education. Then you have kind of mediocre schools where there's a lot of teachers that move in and out of those schools. They don't stay. The facilities are broken down. So it's kind of just a regional low-level school, which if you don't score well, you have to go to one of those schools if you want to continue. If you score well, you can go to a national school. You can go to one of these nicer, more equipped schools. So they were not going anywhere before. So it really goes to show that it's not for lack of not trying or not wanting it. It's for lack of just not having basic access. And when I hear those kinds of impacts and results, it's like, wow, okay, yes, it motivates me to keep going and keep, running this program, because yes, we could build schools. We could put solar on schools. But what happens? I mean, solar on schools is great for electronics and other things. But what we're also finding is that the kids will walk late at night to go stay at the school and study. They end up sleeping overnight, so they stay on the floor of the school. There's teachers that live on site, on premise in the teachers' quarters, teachers' assistants, other people in the community can come hang out at the school. So it becomes this evening hangout or stay overnight place, which is also not ideal. Or the kids study and then late at night they walk home again in the dark to their dark homes. So by having a lamp that also allows for the young learners to stay at home, finish their chores, stay at home in the evening, study, go to sleep, get up early and go to school, rather than this spending time late at night at the school. They sleep on the floor. Many teachers have told us that happens. All sorts of things can happen at that point. Boys and girls and teachers and everybody staying there.
I love that something so simple, not that it's easy to do. This project is obviously not easy, but something so simple as having a light changes these lives so immensely. So Nicole, why are you doing this work? What drew you in and what keeps you going?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a great one. About 10 years ago, I pivoted more out of film and into global work. And it was an interesting process because I was trying to balance both for a long period of time, both on camera, producing and getting my projects going. I leaned into solar because I felt that with my focus of environmental wildlife conservation, my passion for that, solar was a through line that could help the people and help the environment. And it's kind of organically moved from there into our program. I transitioned, I would say, almost fully over to the Iconic Earth work, though, because I started to feel a lot more energized and motivated. And it was like, no matter how tired I was, I just felt like I could keep going with the global work, with impacting lives, changing lives. Whereas with the film work, I started to get really weighted whenever I had an audition or I had to put something on tape, or I was not as motivated. So I listened to that energy inside of myself and I moved more into the global work. And I just found that working with young people and students and these kids that we've really leaned into this solar lighting program because these kids are in the highest dropout rate age range. So we work with upper primary. And the number of students that then move into secondary is a lot less than what goes through primary. And this is girls are facing early marriage, pregnancy. They start missing school because of the time of their month, menstruation, and then they miss so much they feel like they just can't go back. And as soon as the kids are kind of not really into school, often the parents don't really support it because they're more into traditional values anyway. So it's like, okay, fine, you just do what we did and live off the land and go do your chores and you'll be married by the time you're 16 and off you go. So we really wanted to bolster these kids to get them into secondary because it seems once they're in secondary, they're supported. And as far as lighting, it was such a simple win. It had multiple wins associated with it. And yes, a lot of people ask me about bigger complex solar systems and installation of these systems, but I just found by putting this tool in these children's hands at this age was transformative for them. Not 100%. I mean, there are cases that the lights get taken or something happens or the kid's just not motivated, but it was enough out of the group that receives the lamps that I really believed in it and just believed in the impact of it and the safety it brought to students. And I don't know, I've been searching my own history. I'm like, was there a time in my life when I was a child that light somehow brought me safety and security, and I'm kind of reliving that and possibly.
Well, also just being appreciative of, having it, never having to worry about light except the few times the power goes out. And then just knowing that there are people that don't have it, something must have pulled a string. Do you have a goal for how many lights you want to place?
My initial goal was to reach 1 million, which is already a big goal, 1 million by, into 2030. And that's even if we have pre-orders that we're still kind of having to deliver into 2031, but we're organized. I did a calculation. If we double each year, we will be able to reach that goal. A lot of people have been asking me, and it's something I'm now researching, is to get carbon credit certified. So I've been talking with certifiers to get our certificate so we could sell carbon credits associated with the solar lamps. And in this case, the financiers and certifiers are pushing us to even higher numbers. So they're saying, well, can we reach 4 million or 5 million? So I've gone back to Child Fund. They said, yes, it's possible as long as we do it in increments to scale up. But again, that's another bigger financial commitment because we do need to get certified, which costs a certain amount. And then we do need to purchase the initial lamps to move into that level. So the credits wouldn't start paying off for a couple of years by the time they're out and the money is rolling. So we would still need to purchase those, 1 or 2 million lamps.
Right. How much do they cost to make?
It's approximately $5 a lamp is our cost right now. That can be a little bit less or a little more depending on shipping. So we often ship from China. Sometimes we buy locally, but majority are made in China. The cost to deliver it to the student right now is about 10 on top of that. So we're average about 12 to 15 a student to do the delivery, the training, and the monitoring, which means going back into the field a number of times to collect data and then recognize the schools. Child Fund does come in with a portion of that. So the remaining that we need to fulfill is, about 70% of that cost right now. And my vision with it would be to really transform education access. When education access is transformed and kids have this ability, early marriage goes down. Having 10 children goes down because you're too busy with your studies and your goals and your dreams. Higher education usually means greater access to healthcare. And, a lot of the kids want to go back and serve their communities. So it raises up the standard of living for the whole region. So if we can start getting into those larger numbers and to really refine our monitoring program and how we're monitoring impacts and to stick with those students, that's even a part of it, is sticking with those students in schools. My dream would be to shift education access for these kids and just raise the quality of life for a large population, which changes the dynamic for the whole world. It creates goodness for the whole world, essentially.
You are such an inspiration. So, Nicole, how has Women in Clean Tech affected you, or how do you hope that WCS supports you or helps your program in the future?
Great. Well, Women in Clean Tech has definitely impacted me. That's where I met you. So that's how I got here today. I've always met a lot of really interesting, creative and driven women at these events, sometimes men as well that float into the events, which has been great. People focused on renewable energy, clean tech, sharing of ideas. I also like the learning opportunities. I follow a lot of the posts, and although I'm often in the field or, out of country, the learning opportunities have been really outstanding, and the events are getting more fun and creative, I can see, which make me really want to jump in there and get to one. I just have to pin my feet down first. I really love that through this podcast and through possible film screenings and it's giving some of the people in the community, the Women in Clean Tech community, opportunities to share their stories and speak and learn about their journey and learn about their vision. What do they want to change with renewable energy, climate, and globally? And what are the challenges on a micro level that they go through, that we can relate to? And possibly, in my case, opportunities to share the film and speak to audiences, panels. And I really love that the Women in Clean Tech is coming into more cities. So it's giving more opportunity for women that maybe aren't in these centralized hubs, these big cities, opportunities to join events and then also follow online. And growing up in a small town in Canada, that's something that's close to my heart as well, giving people access that maybe aren't in these urban centers to participate in some way. So I think that's exciting.
I am excited to see what is to come. And I thank you so much for your time today and for sharing this. And I want to leave everyone with kind of maybe one last inspiring thought. So what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is, I think one of the biggest things that gives me hope is young people that are really switched on to the environment and creating positive impact and innovation for positive impact. Like, they're young kids that I see creating these very thoughtful inventions or ways to shift things. And it's this energy of wanting to create positive change and seeing it in young people where they're actually really thinking about it. That gives me a lot of hope. And then the other thing is just, when you're feeling stressed or all the things going on in the world, and I just go for a walk in nature, and like right now it's spring. So all the little buds that are coming up and all the little green, and it's just, nature has a way to always cleanse and regrow and shift and change. Nothing is ever stagnant. And that also gives me hope, just that the world or nature is holding us and has us in her hands in some ways. And that's a lovely thing. One little tidbit I want to share before I go.
Yes.
So in Uganda, we learned this wasn't actually, I started interviewing other people that do solar lighting programs as well, just to learn about their impacts, because I'm really curious about how light impacts. And the mothers, young moms in a household, were afraid to use their mosquito nets, which you have like things like the Gates Foundation and things that have gone and given out all these mosquito nets to people. But they didn't want to set the house on fire with these kerosene lamps. So they had a new baby and they were more worried about a fire happening than malaria. So they're like, but I would rather have that than burn. So with the solar lamps distributed, the young moms were no longer afraid to use mosquito nets at night. So they can put up the mosquito nets. Cases of malaria started going down in the communities. And that's just another incredible impact of having a solar lamp in the household, where it's actually impacting health and wellness with something like malaria.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's little things you would not always think about. So it's really great, the power of light. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole, so much for your time. Let's get 1,000,000 lights.
Yes, 1,000,000 children changing their lives.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
That's it for today's episode of WCS Talks Unplugged, where we share real stories, real solutions for the mind and the planet. A huge thank you to our guest for joining us and for the work she is doing to move the clean economy forward. And thank you for listening, for showing up with curiosity, hope, and a desire to make a difference. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone in your network who cares about climate, justice, innovation, or building a more sustainable world. This podcast is brought to you by Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, a global community supporting the next generation of climate leaders. To learn more, become a member, or get involved, visit womenincleantechsustainability.org. Until next time, this is WCS Talks Unplugged. Stay inspired, stay engaged, and as always, stay unplugged.